Good morning, everyone. I assure you, I am going to be brief because the main attraction awaits. My name's Tim Rich, though, in case I haven't had a chance to meet some of you. And it really is a joy to introduce Mike Hernandez to you. There is this notion in Scripture that we're not to hide our light under a bushel basket. But to some degree, we have done just that because Mike is our artist in residence. How many of you knew that to be the case? Okay, well, so you've got a built-in fan base here. And we've not hid him under a basket, but we have hid him sort of in a space that's no longer inhabited. But we really are so fortunate have a glimpse of his creativity today and all the days to come. I'm sure he would be the first to say, come visit him in his studio anytime. I've had that good fortune. It's amazing. And is there still a ping pong table up in the middle of it? Yeah, so you can get in a good ping pong game too. So without further ado, I give you our artist in resident, Mike Hernandez. Mike, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here and sharing this time together. And I'm gonna sort of present this project that you can see on the grass afterward. And then when I'm done presenting, I want to hear back from you, your thoughts. So. Basically, as a note to start, this is not an ableist story. You don't have to be a hiker or a trail runner to feel included in what I have to share here. One thing that makes us all human is that we're all wired to want to be in nature. And in a city like Los Angeles, that can be really hard to do. It's often a luxury to get to a hiking trail or a beautiful garden. So whether you have access to the outdoors or if it's something that you go long stretches between, I hope this story is something that you can relate to in some way, and maybe there are ideas here for you to bounce off of. So 3 years ago, I started trail running routine. I'm a decent runner, but I've always hated running, and I hate weights and exercise. It's a chore, But I came to a point where I needed to get outside more, and I needed exercise. So we live exactly 1 mile south of Eaton Canyon. And in 8 years of living there, I hardly went through the gates. So in December 2021, I ran from the entrance gates to the waterfall and back, which is 2 miles in, 2 miles back. And I decided this is going to be my new ritual, not my exercise. Going to be my religious ritual, a ritual of engagement with nature. Ideally, I would do it 3 times a week, but on average, it was more like twice. After a few months, I realized I was getting to know a particular landscape by repetition, and it felt familiar, but it had been a long time since I had that feeling, because the last time I had that feeling was when I was a kid. Growing up in the high desert, we would bike everywhere, we would walk everywhere, and when I came to Los Angeles for college, I graduated into car culture and just stopped visiting landscapes on a regular basis. So running Eaton Canyon, getting to know the same trail, I was getting to know the rocks and the trees as if they were friends, and there were areas where I would plant my foot in the same spot over and over and over again. And approaching the waterfall was always this rush of anticipation. And so shortly after I started this ritual, I started getting into the water every time, 2-minute cold plunge, and catch my breath and run back. So that became part of the ritual too. So months into the ritual, I was loving these little spots on the trail. And as I ran by and I realized I need a new art project to work on, so I photographed 8 of these spots and decided to make 8 simple concrete paintings on concrete. I didn't want the work to be profound or cutting edge, or I just wanted it to be straight landscape painting. So I wrote 6 points for myself to clarify why I was doing this. Number one is just resources, thinking about resources, thinking about conserving raw materials by increasing time spent per square foot of artwork to limit production, limit consumption, painting on concrete because Los Angeles has concrete veins. Eaton Canyon exists on the border between the city and the wilderness. Number two, I wanted the paintings to flow out of my weekly ritual. So I've attempted to sort of cement my body and the landscape through the painting and infuse the sort of physical experience into the work of art. Mark making. The essence of art is to make a mark, and these fall in the lineage of etching one's perceived mortality into stone and surface. I took with me every time that this was the ancestral home of the Tongva before colonization, and I think about my and our own impending erasure from this landscape. Eaton Canyon is on the edge of the first land back initiative in Los Angeles, which is the Tongva Tarahava Conservancy, and you can find more information about them at tongva.land. Ritual. Exercise and mark making as a meditative discipline. I call it a ritual of engagement because there is a commitment and a sense of belonging and a pilgrimage. Signposts. The artworks are fully realized when they are anchored as signposts along the trail. And the paintings depict the look of the landscape at a particular point in time, and the landscape would hopefully change slowly around it, or quickly in our case. And finally, extraction. The shape of the concrete surfaces are meant to look like sacred architecture, but also just sections of sidewalk. So I wanted them to feel as if they were extracted out of the landscape itself. I think that nature is the most universal sense of the sacred that exists, and from that perspective, these paintings are relics of a particular place and time. So speaking of extracted, my starting point for the run is this entrance off of Altadena Drive. It's about 50 feet south of the main driveway of Eaton Canyon. And there's a house right next to this spot that burned in the fire. But before the fire, this was my personally sacred entrance. And at one point, a tree must have fallen on the concrete and broken it. So I took those pieces, and those pieces are outside as my own little personal relic. To me, it's the gateway, like holy ground. So getting into the landscape, one thing I've learned from this project is that by getting into landscape, we train our eyes to more fully see. In the book Visual Intelligence, Amy Herman trains FBI agents, teachers, students, how to sharpen their sight. And in writing the book, she does it through works of art. I realized that, going to the same trail in Eaton over and over again did a similar thing for me. I ran that trail 305 times in the past 3 years, and I never got bored of it. Every time was like the first time. And I have this theory that many of us have a two-dimensional view of landscape, meaning that it can function as a backdrop to our lives. I think part of the way this functions psychologically is, we're so accustomed to taking pictures and, stand in front of this and take a picture. And so it's our way of reliving experiences. I was at Big Sur, I was at a national park, I was at the beach. And so we stand in front of the landscape, and it becomes sort of a backdrop. And the way I became aware of this idea is through the work of an artist named Elise Mdur, who a decade or so ago was making this body of work. It was really intense. She was contemplating a picture of herself as a child visiting her brother in prison, and she noticed that backdrop. And she began requesting similar photographs from people, and they came pouring in. When you visit a loved one in prison, you often might find a painted backdrop, so you can take a picture with your loved one and pretend you're somewhere other than prison. She has hundreds of these, and she published a book called Prison Landscapes, if you want to look for it. The project made me realize that we often also have a very two-dimensional relationship to nature. It's something we stand in front of. It's rare and special when we go in to landscape, when we get lost in a canyon or lost in a garden, or go into the ocean. There can be a sense of danger, and I think that we turn on neural networks in our brain that kind of connect us to our ancestors when we experience that. And so spending time in Eaton has taught me that there's a real profound change that happens inside of me when I fully immerse myself. Sacred nature. I love thinking of nature as a cathedral. It's an old trope, but anytime you're in the wild and you have this 360-degree view, you're in a very distinct cathedral, and there's nothing like it in the world. My sacred trail winds its way into the mouth of a canyon. The heart beats faster as I go under that bridge, and the canyon walls start growing alongside me. The anticipation grows as I approach the altar, which is this 30-foot waterfall. And at that point, it's a dead end. You're forced to stop. My favorite position in the water was to lay flat on my back and hold my breath in my lungs so I could float, and then just look up at the blue sky, which looked like this torn piece of paper, and so that was my cathedral. Through repetition, we can get numb to beautiful places. Our home might get boring. Our church architecture, might not surprise us anymore. Our workplace doesn't have dance parties. We have this tendency to get numb, even to beautiful things, and which is why it felt like such a strangely counterintuitive perspective to come to the same trail, the same pool of water, and it's never the same. It trains the eye to see deeper into things. You can bring that visual awareness back into your daily life. You can, look at your loved ones and realize that they're changing right in front of you in very subtle ways. And when you get really good at training your vision, I do think it makes it harder to get bored. When you spend time in nature, you meet new neighbors. What connects us is not workplace or creed or zip code. What connects us is the magnetic pull of the landscape. I would regularly see Edgar McGregor, who got locally famous for his 1,000-plus day trash pickups in the canyon, and then locally famous again for his weather reports and sounding the alarm the week of the fire. Pat was a regular to the canyon. He volunteered his time weekly. He invented a method for removing graffiti off of rocks. So I would see him out there with his kit of homemade concoctions and elements and process, and this is a rock after he finished. So he doesn't just paint over it. And he said that red is the hardest color to get rid of. And then there's this guy running around with paintings. They're pretty heavy. So after finishing a painting, I would hike it out there and set it up temporarily and photograph it, and then take it home. I wouldn't leave it there. It's also a fun way to meet new people and make new fans. Barbara Lamprecht, a parishioner at All Saints, would hike to Hernandez Flats every morning for years. And when I first caught up with her after the fire, she said she was completely dislocated without her routine. And my new lifelong friend, Eddie, who I met while checking out the water flow a couple years ago. So 2 winters ago, it was rained for a week, and I finally went to go check out the flow of the water, and it was too heavy to do my run. But there's this guy checking out the water too, and he says, "Are you going for a hike?" And I said, no, I'm just checking out how high the water is. And he's like, me too. And he asked, have you ever been canyoneering? I said, I don't even know what that is. And he said, well, we're the same size. So I have a wetsuit you could borrow. I have all the equipment. We're going out on Sunday if you want to join us. And I said, well, isn't it supposed to start raining again on Sunday? And he has this like kind of Willy Wonka twinkle in his eye when he said, that's why we're going. So I was like, okay. And and so that Sunday we went, and I mean, I knew that there were other waterfalls up there, but we don't have access. And so you start by, hi Barbara, you start by hiking up to Hernandez Flats, and then you drop in behind it into the creek, and it's a 7-hour round trip journey. It's crazy. But you just follow the water all the way down, and there's like 8 or 10 rappels. And as I'm in there, I'm just thinking, like, this is sublime. Like, how many people have seen this? This is, these little niches, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And there's nobody out there. And this is our own backyard. So yeah, this is the crazy part that I wouldn't recommend to anybody. We wear helmets and we get hurt. That shows how high the water level is at one point for that tree to get lodged. At that must have been a flash flood. And there's just all these little pools of water where you can just jump in, and it's truly magical. I've never done anything like that in my life. So the second to last waterfall, which you can get to with a very dangerous hike, or do it this way, is called, we call it Penultimate Falls. And it's actually a slide. So that's me. You can just, it's scary. But it is so fun. And then when you get to the final waterfall and you're looking over at the top, there's usually a crowd of people, and they kind of look at you like you're superheroes, and it's pretty nice. So canyoneering has been an unexpected part of this journey. Something that Canyon has made very real for me is meditation. And I've never been one to meditate, so I'm new to the practice. But there's a rhythm to the run and a rhythm to the breathing. And what I think is unique about trail running is you can't completely zone out. And neither can you think about what you have to do that week. You are basically have to be present in the moment, and you have to be looking 10 steps ahead of you. And you see a ledge, and you know that in 7 steps I'm going to hit that with my right foot. It becomes this instinctual thing. So it just dislodges everything out of the brain. It's like a forced eviction. The chores, the to-do list. By deploying my body into nature, I'm physically evicting everything, and there's an elation that follows. So I think it's similar to what breathing exercises or meditation does for people. I even feel like I just kind of disappear and become one with the ground. And we all really need mental breaks, obviously. A friend recently told me that the reason she comes to church every Sunday religiously for years is just because it's the one place in her entire week where she has to sit and absorb what's in front of her. She can't think or plan. And I thought, that's really nice. I'm going to try that. Mortality. One of the most poignant lessons the Canyon has taught me is to walk with and be present with mortality. Sometimes the Canyon teaches this lesson in very direct and obvious ways, like the time I got in the water when it was about this heavy, and the waterfall pushes the water out, but then it sucks around the side, and I started getting sucked into the water, and thought, there's nobody out here. If I tumble in this, will I come out? So I was really mad at myself when I got out of that situation and didn't do that again. Another time that I was sort of faced with mortality, so to speak, was I was out of town for a week, and we had a heat wave. And when I came back, the canyon was dry, and I was like, wow, I really noticed it. And I hit this ledge that I usually run on, and it was just dry sand. And I planted on the top of the ledge and flipped over and landed in the water, and I limped out of the canyon, just bleeding everywhere. Took me a week or so to come back. The point is that when I have a heightened sense of just how fragile I am and we are, falling from standing height on a rock can do real damage. You'd think that we'd be more scared to zoom 75 miles an hour on the freeway. I mean, we live in an environment of airbags and cushions, and we sometimes bark at people as if they aren't fragile either. And spending time in the canyon reminds me that we have fragile bodies and we need to take care of them, and we need to take care of each other. And it's harder for me to stomach real violence in the world when I'm constantly nursing little scratches. Materiality is the gateway to memory. Along with a heightened sense of vision, I get a heightened sense of materiality and love for the physical world, especially when the same landscape changes throughout the year. This is a quick video of my friend Marco crossing the stream. This is about as the heaviest amount of water that you can safely cross. A friend of mine said in an interview after losing his home, some people say it's just stuff, but your stuff tells your story. And a week after the fire, I went into my garage where I keep a lot of keepsakes and notes, and I was like going through it, and I was like, if I lost all this stuff, I wouldn't remember half of it. It's by picking it up and holding it that the memory comes back. A lot of memories are permanently gone for people. Our physical world is like cartography to who we are. And so I didn't lose my home in this fire, but in 2008, the Sayre fire happened out in Sylmar, and it burned that Oak Ridge mobile home park, and that's where my grandparents lived, and I had a room there because I was divorced at the time, and so we lost our home, we lost my room, and the hardest loss from that fire for me was all my sketchbooks from high school through college. Like, those are such formative years, and I was working stuff out, and I was drawing, and I was lectures and notes, and that was the hardest part. Like, I don't have that stuff here, and so yeah, this is a time where we are, some of us, shaking fists at the mountain. This is the morning of January 8th. Some of the lessons I've learned are obviously post-fire. I've been thinking about how fire is necessary to regrowth and all that, but it's not necessary to burn our town down. I was talking with two friends who each lost their home, and one of them said, I know it doesn't make sense, but when I look up at the mountains these days, I get really mad at the mountains. And my other friend piped in and said, oh yeah, nature and I are not on good terms right now. This is why, if you're the victim of a crime, you don't get to be on the jury. There's this. It makes a ton of sense for that pain to just manifest as anger. And Altadena artist John Knuth, who lost his home and his studio, said, "This is our Pompeii," and that mountain rained fire on our city like an angry god. And I've been exiled from my personal sanctuary, and I'm sad about that. But I don't have any insight or suggestions about the level of loss and anger. It's something I'm still processing and learning from others. Author Pico Iyer was in conversation with Vijay Gupta of Romans recently, You can find the video on YouTube. It's pretty good. They're talking about his new book, Aflame, Learning from Silence. And Pico lost a home years ago, and he talks about that in the book, but the book is mostly about his repeated trips to a monastery in Big Sur. And he quotes somebody as saying, "We are here to wake up from the illusion of separateness," when they go into the monastery. And nature, silence, devotion to place, we may feel temporary dislocation and disillusion when we first experience those things, but I think that's because our daily routines tie us to the illusion of safety and the illusion of comfort and control. And we are here to wake up from the illusion of separateness. Even though I usually go to the canyon alone, I come out feeling more connected than when I went in. It's like a magic trick. And something I've practiced for myself and teaching my children is that nature is an extension of our home, and our home is not just the house on Loma Vista. Eaton Canyon is our home. The Huntington Library is our home. The beach, the mountains, our family and friends have homes that we consider part of ours. And so when we extend our sense of belonging, we realize that we can't lose it all at once. We still have anchors. Our roots run out in all directions, and that's why we come to church. So the last lesson from nature I have is that nature fights fascism. I haven't fully fleshed out this idea, but I do think that nature fights fascism. Technology is increasingly dictating our social circles, our friendships, our access, financial transactions. It's surveying our productivity, demanding we become more entrenched in the marketplace and consume. Does anybody else want to get off this train? Going into nature is my silent protest. It's an indirect protest, but I don't want technology to regulate my internal compass. That's what the earth is for. So I'm going to wrap up with some religious parallels, the first being baptism. I didn't used to get much out of the phrase, remember your baptism. But after baptizing myself a couple hundred times, I'm starting to get it. My original baptism was when I was 8 years old, and it was to accept Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior and go to heaven. And I've been trying to reverse that baptism for the past 3 years by ritually washing it off. And what is my new baptism? I still haven't figured that out. But in her book, Sacred Nature, Karen Armstrong writes, "Religion is hard work. Its rituals are designed to effect a profound change within us. A religious ritual should be a transformative event." So this is Palm Sunday, and we have the scripture where Jesus rides a donkey into the city, and crowds are cheering and waving palms. And I love the contrast to later in the week when Jesus goes from getting a free ride on the donkey to becoming the donkey. He's forced to carry the instrument of his torture and death. He's whipped and spat upon. Today we hear about the triumphal entry with praise and adoration, and Friday we'll have the walk of shame, the death march, the final hike to the grave. And I think many of us live between feeling successful and an important one day to feeling heat and scorn another day. And the canyon has taught me to just try to focus on the path. You can take a look around, but you have to keep going. There are no crowds of people cheering me. There's no one jeering at me. When I get distracted from the path, I'm very likely to catch a rock with my toe, and it's either a hard recovery step or a fall. It's very subtle, but with my artwork on the lawn, you might notice there's like a Stations of the Cross feeling to it. I grew up Protestant, so I didn't know the Stations of the Cross very well, but I'm a friend to a monastery, St. Andrew's Abbey in Valyermo, where Alice and I go to an artist retreat twice a year. And they have an outdoor Stations of the Cross that it's built into a desert hill, so you kind of take this small hike. And what I love about that station is I only walk it every 6 months. I'm aware that I was last here 6 months ago, and what has changed in my life, and where will I be 6 months from now. We've immortalized Jesus' last hike, and it's a reminder that we have to treat every hike as if it could be our last. When I run the stations of Eaton again 2 or 3 years from now, it'll be a very different canyon, and I'll be a different person, and maybe I won't be able to find some of my original stations, and maybe I'll create new ones. But this layering of meaning and bringing the old into the new, I'm hearing all kinds of ideas from friends who plan to rebuild their homes, of how they're incorporating what they've lost into what they plan to build. And so this disastrous rupture has caused us to be mindful in new ways. And while the classic 14 Stations of the Cross is fairly static and doesn't change from year to year, how we experience them and how we create our own stations is anything but static. So my final run in Eaton Canyon was this past Christmas Eve. We went out of town after Christmas, and I had jobs when I got back, so I wasn't able to get one more run in. But I had a frequent habit when I was soaking in the waterfall. I would look around and I would think to myself, if this place burns, I'll be 80 years old before it looks this good again, because it last burned in '93. And so on that Christmas Eve, I remember having that distinct thought one last time. And I'm used to this kind of disappointment because my parents didn't wake me up for Halley's Comet when I was 8 years old. And so it'll come when I'm 85. But yeah, Eaton Canyon was lush, and it was beautiful. But I guess I get to enjoy being a parent now, because now we all get to experience her growing, and that's beautiful too. So this was my last picture of Eaton. So you can ask me questions, sure, but I also I want to hear back from you, your experiences with nature, lessons learned. I would love, there's a microphone somewhere. I would love to have some thoughts from you.
Test. Oh, good. All right. This is one of those things. I'm so glad that I did show up and come. Mike, you're very special. Always have. I've always been really amazed about the way that you can interpret and put it in a religious perspective, spiritual perspective in terms of the exterior world. And I really relate to this. Claire and I lived 33 years across from Eaton Canyon. And that was a ritual of mine also when I had my old English sheepdog. And we would go into the canyon all the time. And it is a loss. It really is. But what I appreciate about the way that you're talking about your experiences, I haven't figured out that vocabulary of how to explain the loss for me. You know, I can't, I'm struggling. I really am struggling, because one of these things about that, the beautiful, we were there during the '93 fire, and I have to admit to you, 2 years after that fire, it was the most beautiful place. There were plants, there were things that didn't exist in there, and I know there's a thing about the baptism and the rebirth that comes out of that is going to happen here. However, it's those things you can't take with you, and you have to decide whether they were important or not, right? So I really appreciate this, and we have unfinished business anyway, and but that is a special place, but there's a lot of special places. The place where we're leaving right now, is just the opposite because it's right in the middle of downtown LA. And there's a lot of people that don't live in a canyon, they live on the street. And that is a whole nother perspective that we have to have. Serenity exists where you have to find it, you know, because it isn't always. Mother Nature exists in a lot of different ways. So, thank you.
I'm going to give a quick dessert part on this. This makes me thank you, Mike, because this is home for us. I mean, we scaled down to move into a townhouse, and our kid says, but what about our tree house? What about it? We said, look, we have Eaton Canyon. Look, you have a massive backyard. And we had birthday parties just on Saturdays, and there was a period of time where it was almost like people hadn't discovered Eaton Canyon. And then it was like a few years later, maybe 10 years after we've been living there, it was like they discovered Eaton Canyon, you know?
Yeah, they did.
so the kids used to walk up to the waterfalls, and you know, I'm not an outdoorsy person, but when you live in nature like that, you can't help but notice how things change. Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you, Clara.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to ask you a question, and I missed the first part, so you may have already addressed this, but as an artist, were you completing some of these works after the fire? Was this a series that?
So the
Before?
series was completed last year, and I even got to show it at Eaton Canyon Nature Center last summer, outdoors. That was really nice. But I was starting to work towards, you know, what's the next? I think I want to follow that canyon and keep going up. And so one of the paintings out there is brand new. It's of the penultimate falls.
I'm curious, when you're stepping into that place in the studio and you're aware of all the feelings, and when you mentioned that thing about carrying attitudes and moods into your day, and you can manifest it in tripping, right? So when you're in the studio and you bring some of that energy in and you start working, and you're really aware that you're channeling some of that energy, and I'm wondering how you approach work, especially if you were to do a post piece, you know, and you have done, how that comes through in the work. So I'm curious about that. And I also just want to say thank you for this. I've been, Eaton Canyon in the background has been there my whole life because my grandparents built a home probably about 1915 or so, coming up as a kid. And so, yeah, thank you. Thank you for this.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, I don't have tattoos, but I feel like I've been tattooed by Eaton Canyon through this process. So when I'm in the studio with these works or with new works I'm thinking of, now it's just coming from here. I do have photo references to work from, but there's a lot that's just coming from here now. Barbara?
Thank you, Mike, for all these wonderful images and the way that you've interpreted your own journey through this. You were talking about place and memory, and I just got back from making a presentation on place, memory, and cognition, and it turns out that our brains are extremely efficient. So we make these, our visual system makes these things called retinal tags, retinal addresses, and they're thrown out basically into the environment. And when we're in that same environment, we recapture a whole repertoire of memory that is stored back here, but it's only being back in that place that all those memories are resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we lose place, and when I had to give this presentation, I was thinking a lot about what does it mean to lose place And what does that do to our memory? You talked about this, Steve. You talked about this, Clara. I mean, those are vital things. And how do we retrieve those memories? You know, if we no longer have a streetscape that resembles anything we can remember, where exactly was Steve's pet shop? You know, I'm ready to go illegally into the canyon again. I can't wait. It's been long enough. I'm willing to kind of get my wrist slapped, but I'm desperate to go back. I'm desperate, and
I feel you.
I do other places, and that's cool, but they're not home.
Yeah. We have a couple more minutes.
We'll cut that part. As a defense attorney, we'll cut the part where she said she was illegally willing to do it.
Hi. I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate so many things you've said, and I'm still absorbing them. Yesterday, my wife and I lost our home in Altadena, and yesterday we went for the first time back to the JPL Trail, which is, to some extent, is one of my homes. First time I went there was when I was a Girl Scout, fourth graders.
Can you check the mic? It keeps cutting out.
I'll hold it closer. Is that good?
Okay.
So I said that for me, JPL is one of my home trails, having gone there for the first time when I was a fourth grader. And there were rumors that it burned as well, and then it didn't. And we were happy to hear that, and I know that it was hit a lot by the winds, but that's been cleaned out. And so we went there for the first time yesterday since the fires, and yesterday was also the day they started to clear our lot, but we really wanted to do it anyway, and it worked. But just going back to where I've always gone, even though if anybody knows anything about that trail, the floods and the different things over the years have changed it, and it's not the same, but it's the same. Mm-hmm. And so the peace that I felt being out there, saw other people that I've seen out there before, as we're like, hey, good to see you again, good to see you again. It was just amazing. And I do find renewal in nature and all of the things that you said. The other thing I wanted to comment on was stuff. Because I'm not a big stuff person in general. I'm not a shopper. I'm not a, you wouldn't go through my house and go, oh, wow, what amazing, expensive things. But the loss of the things that connect me to experiences and relationship has been painful. And I like how you expressed it as our stuff is a map. My wife has mentioned, both of us had, prior careers long with a lot of stuff connected to it. She was in television and so had the swag and everything. And all of that's gone. She still had that career, but like all of the little connections to it, the little mug that had that on it and the little are all gone. And it's not like I don't remember where I worked before, things like that, but it's when you pick up that thing and you go, oh, yeah, remember that? And the travel things and those things that just, we do our inventory, and I'm going to say, 22 quetzales. I don't think it was a big value, yeah. But it's the connections that we lose. And I appreciate your words around that, because it's hard to say I miss stuff and not have it feel like that's a materialistic thing. Right. And it's not. I mean, right. For me, I can only speak for me, but for me, that's not really what it's about. And I know I'm going to get checks from the insurance company, but that's really not what it's about. Yeah. So I appreciate those.
Thank you. We have to say goodbye to our online audience. So thank you for being here. And Arroyo Seco. It's amazing. It's my new trail. So maybe I'll see you out there. Thank you. All right. So I'll see you on the lawn. Well, we can go look at the art.